and that we also elect more Chinese and Asian American elected officials who understand this as a personal story, so that their experiences can be reflected in city government and also state government as well.
加州众议院第26选区包括南湾5座大城市，像是 Santa Clara、Sunnyvale 以及 Cupertino 和 Jose 等等。而在这边，它也是以世界科技中心为名。在这边呢，包括像是 Apple、IBM 以及 Google 等总公司的总部都设在这边。在这边的人口总共有49万人，当中有10%为亚裔。在今天的仇恨边缘的节目当中，就为观众朋友们邀请到是这个选区的代表众议员罗达伦 Evan Low 来到我们节目当中，他也是美国历史上民选官员最年轻之一，所以接下来我们一块进行今天的访谈。欢迎收看今天的仇恨边缘，我是海翔。在今天节目当中呢，我们为大家邀请到的特别嘉宾是美国加州众议院的议员罗达伦来到我们节目当中，一块来欢迎他。Evan, welcome to join us.
Oh, Jared, so good to see you again.
You look so great. How have you been?
I've been good. We just finished a campaign and election and the political environment, so I'm so glad that it's all finished, that we can focus on the new year.
I think we probably know each other like more than 10 years, right?
That's right.
But you
at
know,
least.
Yeah, at least 10 years. But you know, some people probably don't know where the District 28 is, right?
Sure.
And could you please tell us a little bit about your role and the district you represent?
Sure. I serve in the California State Legislature representing Sunnyvale, Cupertino, San Jose, and also Santa Clara. So there's a number of different companies that are international that are in that district, but I'm very proud to be able to be close to my 9th year in the California State Legislature now.
How did you become an elected official?
Don't we all want to become elected officials? And as good Chinese individuals, we do politics? No? No, just my father is an optometrist. He's a doctor, and he said, you should also become a doctor. But I realized how important it is to be involved in our democracy, to be involved in society, and also to provide a voice. And I found that when I ran for office close to 20 years ago, we did not have the type of representation in Santa Clara County, even though the Asian American population consists of close to 40% of the county of Santa Clara. 40% is the largest demographic in the county of Santa Clara in Silicon Valley, and yet we still don't have the type of representation that we need.
其实我们也都知道说，这个罗达伦他是在这个南湾长大的。As we know, you were raised and born in the South Bay. How have you seen your hometown change over the decade?
Well, when I was born and raised in San Jose, we saw the community of Silicon Valley more as orchards. So that of apricots, plums, apples. The word apple means something completely different today in Silicon Valley. And so that's where you see the importance of this being an international destination, of the technology hub in the world. And we need to help ensure, though, that we focus on the things that are important to making sure that we have Silicon Valley just as strong in the decades to come.
I see. So, did you see any hate incident and racial slur targeting like Asian students when you were young?
Yes, of course. So I'm 4th generation Chinese American in California, and yet I'm still seen as a perpetual foreigner. That is, I'm not truly American, even though I'm 4th generation here in this country. So what's important, though, is that we help to reflect that we are just as American as anyone else. And the answer to your question is yes. When I was in school, when I grew up in San Jose, I was a victim of hate crime.
You were?
Absolutely.
Wow.
On our home, I remember our home was spray painted with a boat that said, "Go back to China." But this is my country, and this is my heritage. And that's why I feel so passionately about stopping API hate, by why we need to help ensure that we are demonstrating that we are vocal and we are just as American as everyone else.
In that case, you just mentioned about yourself. How did you react at that moment?
Well, it was hurtful. I didn't understand what the challenge was, that I never understood why there was so much hatred towards me as an individual just because of my appearance. But you realize as we grow up in a wider society that these racial tensions exist, and that's why it's our obligation as Chinese Americans to participate in the public process and help to ensure that we provide equality to everyone in every community as well.
I see. So what's the difference between before and now?
Well, we've seen more representation of Asian Pacific Islanders and Chinese Americans in things like the NBA with Jeremy Lin. We're seeing more newscasters and faces in journalism, more actors. We are seeing more individuals in politics and government. The visibility is that much more important to help ensure that we provide the sense of acceptance within our American society.
I see. So what kind of effort did you and your colleagues from the CA Assembly accomplish in the past to combat this issue?
Well, to stop Asian hate and to uplift the Asian American and Chinese community, we've passed a number of pieces of legislation, some which include helping to ensure that Hollywood has the visibility of Asian Pacific Islanders in major films. We've also required minorities, which includes Asian Pacific Islanders, on corporate boards. That is, companies that are founded and incorporated in California. A certain percentage of the board of directors consist of Asian Pacific Islanders. We've also passed close to $165 million to go towards community-based organizations to stop Asian hate. These are ethnic media, ethnic press, and also community-based organizations helping to keep our community safe. But we're not done. We must do a lot more to help ensure that we seize and take our rightful place in American society.
So that was the past few years. How about in the future? Anything ongoing, like any plan?
Well, we know that we are victimized of specific hate crimes. We've seen it on TV, we've seen viral videos going out, seeing members of our community being harassed, intimidated, attacked on the streets, in places of shopping. My own grandmother told me that she's more fearful of being harmed and hurt by a hate crime than of COVID. So it's imperative that we stop and create an environment where our communities are safe. That's why we need to help ensure that we have safety and justice in the state of California and looking at the laws that encapsulate those two key components.
Yeah, I think we can talk about the senior issues later. Yeah. 所以不管从历史层面或从现实层面当中，我们都可以看到亚裔在美国的社会当中是占有一股不可忽视的力量。广告之后，我们继续我们的话题。新冠疫情爆发之后呢，其实这个亚裔的仇视的问题是一直存在，而且是持续的暴增当中。其实部分都是因为美国政客自己本身的利益来炒作这样的一个话题。在今天节目当中，我们继续来跟 Evan 好好的聊一聊。So Evan, in your opinion, what do you think we are seeing a surge of a hate crime targeting Asian community in the past 2 or 3 years?
We've seen this surge and increase in hate crimes attacking the Chinese community. Specifically, I'd say because of a number of reasons. One, you had then the President of the United States stating that this was the Kung flu or the Chinese virus, specifically targeting the community, coming from the top official and the President of the United States and that of Donald Trump. That's why we must speak swiftly and saying that we condemn these type of racial rhetoric and the tones attacking the Chinese community here. And that's very problematic. Secondly, we've seen that we are victimized and that we are seen as easy targets during this pandemic. And as we get out of this pandemic, it's important that our communities are feeling safe, that we have the public resources of police officers to help keep our community safe and protect us, and that there's adequate reporting and also in language, because we know that oftentimes those who are victimized may not feel comfortable if English is not the first language for them, that they need to feel comfortable being able to go to the law enforcement and telling their story, because so much of the crimes are actually underreported or not reported at all. So it's important that we use the data to help ensure that we get the resources that we need to keep our community safe.
So I just heard about you talk about data. Do you have any data can share with us?
Well, we've seen, unfortunately, close to 65% increase over the past 2 years on hate crimes specifically targeting Asian Pacific Islanders. And if you look at the data from local prosecutors' offices, from that of the state of California as well, we know that these are happening specifically because of the things that I talked about. Again, the racial rhetoric and the tones coming from Donald Trump himself saying that this is a Kung flu or Chinese virus, and that has had significant problems that we are to be blamed for this pandemic. So we need to speak out against this and using data while also our common sense that this is unacceptable and that we must speak out. That's why we saw the protests on the streets, stopping Asian hate throughout the entire country. You're seeing Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders going out on the streets protesting, saying, no more, we will not accept Asian hate any longer.
I see. So let's go back to the 2010. In the 2010, I think you made a history by becoming the youngest openly LGBT mayor in the country at the age 26. Well, very young. So in your opinions, how did you see the LGBTQ community combat hatred all this year, and what can we as an Asian community learn from it?
Well, there's some uncanny parallels between that of the civil rights for the LGBT community and that of the Chinese community. We just simply, both communities, want to be loved and protected, to feel safe in their own communities, to not be targeted. And unfortunately, you're seeing the same things happen each and every day. There are pieces of legislation that are attacking China, that are attacking Chinese living in the United States. And unfortunately, if we have an Asian face, it's difficult for someone to know whether or not you're Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Laotian, or anyone like that. So it's important that we stand firmly together as an Asian community to say that we need to speak up for the voices of everyone. Now, the current fight for LGBT equality is happening right as we speak right now. There's federal legislation going before the President Biden's desk on enshrining federal protections for both interracial marriage and also LGBT same-sex marriage as well, right before the president's desk as we speak. So this is an exciting time to be able to see that this has received bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats supporting federal legislation to make sure that we have constitutional protections for interracial marriage as well as LGBT same-sex marriage as well.
Do you think about the LGBTQ community and the Asian community face up the same concept issues in the United States?
Certainly, that LGBT members of the community are targeted just because of who they are. We've seen this. We've seen specifically nightclubs in which there's a firearm shooting targeting these communities. This is no different from seeing the Chinese community walking in the streets here in the Bay Area, being harassed, being robbed, being mugged, being targeted. This is the same type of hate. And by the way, this is the same hate that the Jewish community has faced, the same hatred that the Black community has faced in the history of the United States. And that's why we need to stand firm to saying we are all human and we need to stand firm for what we believe in. Just love one another in this common sense.
I see. So as I know, and everybody know, Chinese, especially our senior, they are afraid to go out. So do you have any advice for them?
Number one, we need to help ensure that we are registered to vote. Because as I mentioned earlier, we are the largest demographic in the Bay Area. Asian Pacific Islanders are the largest demographic than any other group in the Bay Area. So it's important though that we vote and that we voice our opinions, that we also articulate and demand to our government that we want to be protected and the laws that we have need to be enforced, while also making sure that we live in a society that is equitable for all communities as well too. So it's that type of engagement. It's almost trying to recalibrate and reframe how we think. That yes, Chinese don't like politics, we're quiet and we're timid, but this is the United States. What is important is that you get in the arena and that you vocalize your positions and you speak out. And that'll take some time to change because it's not culturally like us. It's not a norm for us culturally to speak out and to yell or to go on the streets. But this is American democracy, and that's what's going to be required for us to make the change that we want to see.
Thank you. 其实这个问题就像 Evan 讲的，它是一个长期累积下来，一直没有办法解决，但是必须我们共同努力的这样的一个问题。广告之后呢，我们继续来关注。 欢迎继续收看我们的仇恨边缘。在今天节目当中，我们讨论了很多亚裔碰到的一些问题，包括现在要讨论的长者所碰到的亚裔仇视的问题，到底该如何解决呢？我们来听听 Evan 他是怎么说。Asian people tend to be like a silent when they were being attacked by the hate crime. What do you think is very important to report this issue?
Well, we know that culturally, the Asian community typically is more shy and we don't like to speak out and we just like to keep to ourselves, provide for the family, and just do a good job. But we realize that because we are now victimized, that it's important that we speak out. And that's why it's important that we have laws on the books that has what we refer to as cultural competency, that police officers and law enforcement has officers who can speak in language that knows the community, that knows the neighborhoods, and that members of the community feel comfortable and safe to report in Chinese, in Vietnamese, in Korean, whatever the language might be, so that we can get the data. Because oftentimes, once we get that data, we can allocate resources based on that data. But if we don't have the data to back up that of the policy, it's difficult for us to make this type of change. And that's why it's important that everyone reports.
Yeah, you were saying about the people need to speak out, but how?
Well, they can speak out by going to write letters to the editor. They can do op-eds. They can post on social media, or they can organize the neighborhood meetings to have conversations about a neighborhood watch, what they need to do to keep their community safe. Also, going to City Hall and speaking out in a public meeting. Now, I know that's maybe very intimidating for many people, but this is American democracy, and that's what's going to be required for us to make the change that we want to see.
So how do you encourage people to make the first step?
Well, I'm hopeful. I'm of course biased, but I'm hopeful that with individuals like myself, that people feel more comfortable when they go to a city hall and if they go to a government meeting, that they see faces that look like us, so that it's not as intimidating and that they feel comfortable with that connection. Otherwise, if we don't have representative democracy, people that reflect the community in the highest places of power, then it won't be as functioning to help ensure that there's the legitimacy of helping to support the community.
So in your opinion, how can we stop this issue in the first place?
Well, I think it's number one to help ensure that we have the laws that reflect the current societal problems that we have, knowing who our elected officials are and making sure that we communicate to them. Elected officials, government representatives need to hear from the communities. I mean, imagine this, Darren, if we saw the Asian American community host a town hall of 200 people, residents, and invited the mayor or an elected official to listen. That speaks volume when you see an entire community coming out and demanding for action from their government representatives. So organizing is part of that, helping to help ensure that the government representative sees who this is impacting, who this is actually hurting. And that's where I think we can have the collective voice and the power.
In the future, I think, what are you hoping to see the issue going on in our state, as well as across the whole country?
Well, I think one of the things that is related to stopping Asian hate, but also societal problems, is the cost of housing. Part of the challenge that exists in tackling poverty is who can afford to live in the Bay Area? Housing prices are so expensive that we cannot keep future generations living here. And it's important then that we create an environment where we have housing for younger generations, service workers, everyone alike, to be able to live in the communities that they work in and that they grew up in. And that's going to be the greatest challenge and tackle for us as a state, to help ensure that we have ample and adequate housing for a wide variety of different people in the state.
So I think the Asian hate is still ongoing, right? So how can we stop this?
Well, it's not going to stop overnight, and it didn't come here overnight. But a couple of things. One is we need to be vigilant. We need to make sure that we still register to vote and speak out, and that we also elect more Chinese and Asian American elected officials who understand this as a personal story so that their experiences can be reflected in city government and also state government as well. So this is a long-term approach, this is a long-term project, but it's important that we don't just simply forget, because it's easy to forget because there's going to be a different issue happening and until that next incident happens. So in the meantime, let's continue to speak out against the type of racism when you hear a government official or any other celebrity attacking the Chinese American community. We need to come together and stop that.
Yeah, I think we talk about the Asian hate from the Asian side. How about the other racials? What they should do?
Well, we have been so fortunate in California. I mentioned earlier that the state of California passed close to $165 million from the state budget to be dispersed to community-based organizations to help stop Asian hate. Much of the support came from our allies in solidarity from the Black community, the Latino community, the Jewish community, all alike. Being able to say, we support this with public taxpayer dollars and stopping that. We need to continue that conversation on what that looks like to uplift our Asian community as well as we move towards the future.
How about the education from the young kids?
Well, we need to help focus on education. We passed in the state of California ethnic studies, which includes the experience of Asian Americans. So Asian American studies will be incorporated in the curriculum for future generations of young Californians so that they can learn about the history and know about the contributions of the Chinese community on the railroads, know about the contributions of Chinese in the systems of agriculture and the Filipino and the farm workers movement, knowing about the history of technology and innovation and all of the tapestry of talent that we bring to this table. That history needs to be taught and it needs to be incorporated so that we are not seen as perpetual foreigners, and in fact, that the Chinese community has been here for many generations.
Thank you again to join our show. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
近几年来呢，美国的排外的这个情绪相当的高涨，这也不是一天两天就会结束的，而且这样激化整个社会的矛盾跟冲突。亚裔在这里面所扮演的角色跟问题，也不是一天两天所能解决的。所以呢，在下回的节目当中，仇恨边缘会继续带您关注这样的话题。谢谢您今天的收看，我们下回节目再见。